Welcome to Faith Positive Radio with Dr. Joey Fawcett, the Christian business coaching conversation that increases your faith with greater joy at work so you love God and others more. Dr. Joey interviews Christian business professionals just like you to discover their secrets for working faith positive in a negative world. Welcome to Faith Positive Radio with Dr. Joey Fawcett.
I don't know about you, Faith Positive Nation, but it seems like almost on a daily basis, something happens unexpected for me in my spiritual journey. In fact, I'm more surprised when things go the way I thought they would than when they don't, all right? But there are times in life where pivotal things happen. They carry consequences far beyond the moment, and they're not necessarily things that happen to us that are of our own choosing. And sometimes they're just bad things that happen. Today's guest is Ria Story. And Ria found herself forced to leave home at age 19 because of sexual abuse, and her dad was trafficking her. And she found herself without a job, without a place to stay, and on her own at only 19. At only 19, I don't think I had that much to be concerned about. I mean, I was trying to figure out which class to take as a freshman in college, right? And it was not of Ria's own doing, but yet she learned a whole lot about God's strength, about how faith can bring courage, and about how grace can see you through anything. And now she takes her story to people just like you and me, who are people of faith, but also into corporate settings and other settings, particularly interested in helping women and empowering women to make positive choices. Now, we guys can learn from Ria too. So if you're a guy, stay with me, okay? All right? Don't wink out. Keep listening, keep watching, because Ria has a story that is an amazing story. And maybe that's why her name is Ria Story. That was bad. But with a last name like Fawcett, I can make fun of other people's names, right? Faith Positive Nation, help me welcome to Faith Positive Radio. This episode is all about Ria's story. Ria, thank you so much for the gift of your time and wisdom today.
Absolutely, Dr. Joy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's a pleasure for us to have you. So, I mean, how do you find yourself at 19 on your own, no job, on the street?
Well, growing up in that situation, I really was desperate to get away. And, I share, I'm pretty transparent on my story that life was really tough mentally and emotionally. And when you're growing up in that type of environment, leaving is as bad as it sounds. It's scary because it's scary to think about going out into the unknown. And, there were times when I couldn't think that I would ever get away or that I'd ever escape. And life was just almost not worth living. And I'd run away more than once, several times. And every time I'd run away, my dad would find me and bring me back home, and was very emotionally manipulative, into keeping me there. And when I met my now husband in 2000, June of 2000, in fact, yesterday, we celebrated 19 years since the day we met.
Oh, sweet. Man,
and
that's a great story.
we are blessed. And, with Mac's support, his support gave me the courage to leave home for good. And at the time, he was not a Christian. He was agnostic. And faith had been, I was raised in a Christian home, quote unquote, but it was not most people's definition of Christianity. Faith and God was always used to justify what was done to me in a very hurtful way.
Oh my goodness.
And so, when I left, I would have called myself a Christian, but I didn't have a relationship with God like I do now. But when I did leave home, I realized, I had two choices. I could let what happened to me define the rest of my life and play the victim card, or I could acknowledge it and move on. What happens to us in life influences us, but it doesn't have to define us.
Well, I'm assuming this pattern of abuse started when you were younger than 19. I mean, if it led up to your leaving home at 19.
I was 12. My father started sexually abusing me when I was 12, and it progressed as I got older, and to the point where he bought me a fake wedding ring, and I was forced to play the role of his wife outside our home, and
Mm.
all through the years, friends kind of suspected and family members
Mm-hmm.
suspected, but no one wanted to get involved and
Mm.
rock your boat, and that's pretty tough conversation to have. Mac was the first person to ever ask, and he just, we'd been seeing each other for a couple of months, and he just guessed, and he said, you know what, I see all these red flags and warning signs, and
Mm.
is this what's going on? And that
Wow.
was, when you talk about a pivotal moment,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for the first time, I felt like somebody valued me for me instead of
Mm.
what I could do for them.
Mm.
So I call him my knight in a shiny Camaro, because he drove a silver Camaro back then. Now, 19 years later, we have long since traded the car, but I kept him.
well, I'm sure he's invaluable. He really is. But man, a 19-year-old Camaro would be pretty cool to have right now too. Sorry, I'm a car guy. I love cars, especially Camaros.
Yeah.
I digress. Well, man, there's a message to all of us in Faith Positive Nation. If you think you see something going on, asking a question might offend someone or might create an uncomfortable situation. But somebody like Ria, their life is hanging in the balance. So regardless of if you go to church with them or what, right, Ria?
I'd say get involved. I spoke with a lady not too long ago, and she suspected something, and she just called DHR and reported what she saw and what she knew, and her suspicions proved correct. And so she knows now that she played a pivotal role in getting those children outside the home. So
yeah, because when you're locked in that prison, as you mentioned a moment ago, it's a mental prison as much as it is anything. And
absolutely.
An impressionable young woman coming of age at 12. I mean, that's what you know, and that's all you know. And so you think this is normal, and don't other young girls live like this too? And don't their dads interact with them like this? So you really lock yourself in that mental prison. But the beautiful thing about what God's got you doing now, Ria, is that because of your faith and because of God's grace in your own life and that pivot point, that transformation that he, Faith Positive Nation, don't miss the fact, Mac was agnostic and God used him. Okay. Do not miss that fact. I take a lot of comfort and solace in the biblical story about Balaam's donkey that actually spoke to Balaam and told him where to go and not to go. So, there's Mac, there's me, there's the donkey, all of us can speak into somebody's life, right? And provide that.
Absolutely.
And so by God's grace, God's transforming grace, you, Ria, now tell your story to women and help them discover the power within and empower them to be able to make choices which release God's creative divine design within them, right?
Absolutely. After I left home, the only thing that I could think of was to lock my past away. And I did. I shut it behind a door and I locked it with a key and I threw away the key. I said, I'm not looking back. I'm not going back. And that really wasn't true healing. It's really just kind of ignoring.
It's repressing the experience.
And that went on for 13 years. And in 2013, and I had, after I left home, I went on to be successful. I'd grown up. We were homeschooled, so we didn't go to school. We didn't go to church, just very isolated from society. And so one of my biggest obstacles was first learning just how to interact with people normally.
You can trust people, right?
Yeah, I just didn't have those skills. And the only job I could find, since I didn't have a high school diploma, I'd never been to school, I started waiting tables. And you learn to get good at talking to people when you wait tables.
If you're going to make a living at it.
You do. And it took me only about 2 weeks to realize I didn't want to do that the rest of my life.
Yeah.
It was good work, and I was proud to get it, but I didn't want to stay there. So I went on to be successful. I took some college classes. I started going to college and progressed in my career. But all up until 2013, and I worked for a long time taking classes and night school and on the weekends and working 2 jobs a lot of times. And And I went on to be very successful. But in 2013, I heard a man called Les Brown speak. And
Mm.
if you don't know Les Brown, you have to look him up on YouTube.
Oh,
He's
yeah. He's wonderful.
very inspirational.
Mm-hmm.
And he was speaking to a whole room full of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the audience, and he said, "You have a story to tell, and someone needs to hear your story. Only you can help that person." And I thought, well, I've got a story to tell, but I don't want to tell it.
How do
I
you
worked
tell
hard.
that story, right?
Yeah, I
Mm.
worked hard to forget it. And, I tell people, I'm like, no, Lord, go find somebody else. I'm
Mm-hmm.
on this career path and doing
Mm-hmm.
this job, and worked hard to get here. I'm like, no, Lord, go find somebody else.
Mm.
And it took me 6 months to listen to that voice that said, the reason I brought you through this was to share your story. And I realized that sharing it gave me a purpose.
Mm.
Gave purpose. I talk about God doesn't cause the pain in our lives, but He can use it when
Mm.
we let Him.
Indeed.
So on August 14th of 2013, I shared my story for the
Mm.
first time from the stage, and
Wow. Who'd you
I
share it with?
it was a room full of people. We went for a speaker
Paul.
training, and part of the training was you were supposed to create a 60-second speech, because Les Brown says the best speakers use the fewest words.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could say anything you wanted, but you could only talk for 1 minute.
Mm.
And I had been wrestling with this decision for 6 months, whether to share my testimony.
Mm.
And I didn't even tell anybody I was thinking about it, because I wasn't sure that I could do it.
Mm.
Beyond Mac and just a couple close friends and family members, nobody knew.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be seen as a victim.
Mm.
And so
Sure.
the day of the contest came, and I got up and shared it ended up being 47 seconds. And
Because they timed it.
they did. And when I sat down, it didn't matter if I'd won the contest,
Mm.
because I'd won a much bigger victory in saying, I'm not going to let the past hold me back.
Yes.
And the whole theme was choices. We don't choose what happens to us, but we choose how we respond to it.
Mm.
And that's what's most important. That's what
Mm-hmm.
the theme of what I talk about today is,
Mm-hmm.
our choices create
Mm.
our future and our path.
Mm-hmm.
But I did win the contest, as it turns out.
Did you?
And
Congratulations.
thank you. So 10 days after that, I walked in my boss's office and I resigned from that job I'd worked so hard and gone to school for 10 years to get.
Oh,
And
boy, what was that moment like?
it was a defining moment, because I realized I
Mm.
wasn't chasing a career. I was pursuing a calling.
Mm.
And
Now,
there's a big difference.
distinguish that difference for us, because some people just associate a career with a calling, but there is a qualitative difference.
There is. A career is all about being successful for ourselves, right? We want to
Mm-hmm.
make good money and have a good job and good benefits, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another level, and if we grow beyond success, we can move to significance in the life of someone else. And that's where it really is a calling for me. It's not just about being successful for myself, because I had a great job and a great boss and a great career.
Mm.
But I was willing to give all that up. I cashed in my retirement, my 401k. We sold our house, we sold our cars, and we started a business talking about.
Went down the street to somebody else, right? Oh, well.
But, the material things in life aren't what makes us happy anyway.
Mm.
And when I realized, Mark Twain says the two greatest days in life are the day you're born and the day you discover why. And I'd found my why, and realizing that, there again, God can use what happens in our lives. And
Yes.
that made it worth it. If I could share my testimony and help other people realize that what happens to us is not what's most important. That's powerful. That's true empowerment. Is changing the mindset, emotional freedom.
Yeah, being released from the mental prison in which we find ourselves so very often. So how does your faith help you shape the challenges that you faced since that moment when you walked into the boss's office and said, hey, I've been working for this for 10 years, but I got to go do this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
You cashed in your 401k, you sold the home, you sold a Camaro, right? And then you found yourself staring at a blank slate, but with this immense, intense calling from God. What were the challenges as you moved forward?
Oh, wow. There were so many challenges. We wouldn't have time to talk about all of them. But
what's your favorite?
The biggest challenge, I think, was not knowing what I didn't know and what we didn't know about, starting a business like that from scratch. And we made a lot of wrong steps, a lot of missteps. Probably the biggest challenge in that first year was writing my first book. And it meant revisiting a lot of things I didn't really like to think about or remember. And, it took me almost a year. And, there again, I really struggled with myself as the biggest roadblock in saying, I don't want to be seen as the victim. I don't want people to feel sorry for me.
Right.
And yet, I know that this story can inspire people. And, really, it was less than a 100-page book, and it took me almost a year. And I'd write something, and I'd delete it, and I'd write it. Because for me, the biggest challenge was, how do I share and what's appropriate? And how do I share that in a way that inspires people?
Yeah, well, it's a tough story to share anyway, but you make yourself so vulnerable when you write, especially something that's autobiographical like that. How did you move past fear into a sense of God's calling for you to be vulnerable about this story?
I think anytime we're moving from fear into faith, it's important not to lose sight of why we're doing it. And as long as we can connect the dots between there's a purpose, and it's not just sharing, it's not just sharing a story, but sharing the learning points that others can apply to their own lives, the lessons. And as long as we can remember that, that ties us deeply into that purpose. It's Rick Warren, I believe, says, your greatest ministry comes from your deepest hurt. And it's absolutely true, but that's, the things that make us cry, the things that light us up, often stem from the place where the most pain is. But when we can cross that bridge and help someone else cross the bridge behind us, that gives us the purpose in doing so. And that makes it worth it.
Oh, it does. Wow. So you really, as Paul would say, kept your eyes on the prize of that upward calling and moved from fear into faith that way. Paul also told the Corinthians, that it's at your point of pain that God can use you to minister to someone else. And so I'm reminded of that. I'll ask you your favorite Bible verse at the end, and I hope I didn't
okay.
Away. But anyway, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. So let's say that someone finds themselves today, a woman finds themselves today locked in some sort of prison, whether it's a stark case like yours, or whether it's a sense of unworthiness or lack of purpose, sense of calling in her life. What would you say to her is step one in moving from that fear or whatever it is that's locking her up into faith?
Sure. I talk about the 3 stages of getting out of that emotional bondage in one of my books. And, the first stage is that captivity stage. And we can be captive to a lot of things emotionally. We could be captive to a form of addiction in our life, or, a lot of times good things can be bad things or negative things if they're too much of them present.
Yes.
So whatever it is that holds us captive, we're in that captivity phase if it's limiting us physically or emotionally or spiritually. In some way, if we're still in a state of emotional bondage. And the first thing we have to do is identify that, acknowledge it, be aware of it, because until we're ready, until I was willing to acknowledge that I did have pain from the past, and that it did make me feel vulnerable and afraid, I couldn't overcome it. And that's really the first step, is we have to acknowledge it. And that moves us into the coping stage, which is where I was after I left home until 2013, of just surviving, kind of shove the past up or whatever it is. And we get by day to day, but it's not true healing.
Mm.
It's not really thriving, just surviving.
Mm-hmm.
And, that phase could be months or weeks. It could be years, as it was in my case.
Mm-hmm.
And to move really beyond that, I think, and to move into conquest and emotional freedom, I think number one, it takes being willing to release it.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, what we find is that when we won't talk about something, we give it power over us.
Mm. Why is that?
Because the darkness creates the shame.
Mm.
And, every shame and fear and guilt, all of those negative emotions need darkness, right?
Mm-hmm.
They thrive, they grow in the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to move to that third stage, that conquest over whatever it is, we have to be willing to open up and let the light in. And,
Yeah. I'm
I
reminded
think
of some passages from John that talks about God being that light.
absolutely.
And, Christ being born as the light of the world. So when we shine that light in there, the darkness dissipates, and so the shame with it.
Mm-hmm.
We got all the light we need, but man, it's so hard to turn that corner away from captivity into that light, isn't it?
It is. And, for me, I talk about this to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a decision, and, it's not an easy decision always to move forward beyond hurt or grief or, despair. But it's absolutely a decision that we can make. But it's sometimes a decision we got to make over and over again,
Oh, yeah.
Every day we get up, and I use the analogy of a train station. We can get up and say, I'm going to focus on what's good and positive, and I'm going to get on the positive train and focus on my blessings.
Right.
Or I could get on the other train and the negative and focus on the bitterness.
Yeah.
And
it'd be nice if you could just make that choice once.
It would be. It would
Stay
be.
on that positive train. I must be in the remedial class or something, because I have to re-up every morning. So my
Absolutely.
quiet time, my meditation time to read scripture with the Lord, that's just necessary for me to set my mindset. It's inexplicable to me how you can wake up and be attacked the way that you're attacked. Maybe it's because you had such a great day the day before, and so Satan noticed you, and now he's attacking you, right? I don't know what it is, but just choosing that positive train, to use your metaphor, every day is critically important. What do you do personally, Ria, to choose that positive train every day?
Something I've been really reflecting on here lately that's made a big difference in my day is I spend the first few minutes intentionally, journaling, like really sitting down and writing down what I'm grateful for. This was kind of the inspiration and the concept behind my women's gratitude journal, where, when we focus on what we're grateful for, little things, big things, people, every time we focus on our blessings, we find we have more of them. And, for me, I really like to, it doesn't have to be all a long time, but like you said, sit down the first few minutes of the day. For me, I like it when it's quiet. The rush of the day hasn't started. I set my alarm clock earlier if I need to. And I sit down, I really write down, just a couple things that I'm grateful for today. And they could be little. It could be, man, it's cold in here. I'm sure grateful for some warm slippers. But it also could be grateful for, wow, I was able to impact somebody positively yesterday.
Absolutely.
I'm grateful for, Mac and how he helps me be better and stronger. So really intentionally sit down and what am I grateful for today? And it's powerful. It really changes our mindset for the whole day.
Oh, it's a huge lever based on that fulcrum of gratitude that just shifts your mind in incredible ways. And you're right. Some days we do have to scratch a little harder, or maybe I should be more confessional and say I have to scratch a little deeper to find something that I'm grateful for, because we all get on that negative train from time to time. So I love the warm slippers. I write mine in the evening so that I seed positive thoughts of gratitude in my mind as I go to sleep, so my subconscious will let me sleep all night. Right?
That's good too. That's a great idea.
Yeah, sometimes it's like, okay, I didn't get run over by a concrete truck today, and I'm grateful for that. I had a lot of other stuff that ran over me, but today it wasn't a concrete truck, so I'm still here. or maybe, hey, I was able to get up. I woke up, I was able to walk and go to the bathroom this morning. I mean, it's just something elementary. For me as a Christian, sometimes, Ria, I always fall back on the grace of God expressed through salvation in Jesus Christ. And
Mm-hmm.
it's available to me and renews me every day. And so, yeah, I appreciate your transparency there, because some days, even though, we know we want to be empowered to make the choice, some days are just hard, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a decision, and probably for a lot of people, we find that it's easy to be bitter when someone hurts us.
Mm.
And something C.S. Lewis wrote in Mere Christianity really helped me have a perspective on that. So I love to share that. He talks about in Mere Christianity how Jesus died to forgive our sins, but he also died to forgive the other person's sins. And a lot of times we want to hold on to that wrong that has been done to us, or that hurt, or that bitterness. But see, if Jesus has already paid the debt, we don't have the right to hold on to it. It's not ours, because it's already been forgiven. It's already been paid. It'd be like me getting mad because the mortgage on your house has been paid and trying to demand money for it,
Really.
But we want to own it and claim that hurt and that debt, but it's been paid. We don't have the right to hold on to it. So that really helps me, just release that and say, you know what, Jesus already forgave them. I don't have the right to hold on to that.
Oh, absolutely. And when I can, regardless of what you've done to me, when I can begin to see you through the eyes of Christ, you're a daughter of God, you're a son of God, doing the best you can with what you got. Not that I'm excusing your behavior, but hey, we're all struggling along trying to figure it out. And if Jesus, as you said, has already forgiven you, who am I? And who does it really hurt for me to hold back forgiveness?
It only hurts ourselves.
Yeah, that's the cancer within me. You don't care.
Yeah. There's a difference too. I like to remind people, it doesn't mean there aren't consequences.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't mean that I need to hold on to the bitterness, because it does.
Right.
It's just, I forget who says it, but it's like drinking a poison and expecting the other person to get sick. It serves no one.
Exactly. Well, and therein lies your choice in dealing with the consequences, right? You're
Absolutely.
empowered to make a choice about the consequences. And are you going to let them determine your outcomes, or are you going to determine your outcomes in spite of them? Ria, what kind of groups do you speak to? You've mentioned that you speak to a lot of different groups. What kinds of groups should Faith Positive Nation be thinking about inviting you to come and speak to?
Absolutely. I speak to a lot of women's groups, youth groups. We speak Mac and I both speak together in high schools. We also speak for a lot of corporate conferences and things like that. A lot of what we talk about is leadership and personal growth. But, I find that pretty much almost anywhere I speak, I share a little bit about my testimony. And every single time someone comes up to me and just says, that really made a difference in what you said. I can think of the high school student who wrote a note afterward and said, you made me want to try at life because you've inspired me. And, those are the little things that remind us every single day of, this is why we do.
Yeah, that's what you live to hear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how can Faith Positive Nation get in touch with you to invite you to come speak to their group?
You can find all my contact information or connect with me on my website. It's riastory.com. So RIASTORY.com. I tell people I married my husband for his name. Now, it's not true, but if you're going to be a speaker, you should have a name like Story.
You can't beat that name for a speaker or an author, because you've written, I think you told me 11 books, and there's one that we've got tagged on your page on our website at getpositive.today. And so what's the name of that book?
Sure. That book is Beyond Bound and Broken. And I talk in subtitle, A Journey of Healing and Resilience. And, I shared with your listeners today about the 3 stages of resilience and coping and how to move forward to conquest. And I detail that much more in that book. And, there's also some discussion questions for groups and or journaling to think about it, because I think it's important that we all have a testimony to share, and we can help others. So I'm pretty transparent in that book and sharing some of my challenges and how I moved past them.
Okay, wonderful. And you can go to getpositive.today, Faith Positive Nation, and search for Ria Story, and the links are all there to riastory.com and things like that. If you're out and about right now and you're listening or watching somewhere and you can't quite get to a browser to click over there, do that. And be sure there's contact information there so they can reach out to you, invite you
Absolutely.
to come speak to a group.
You can find my TEDx talk on there, a link to my podcast, Fearfully and Wonderfully Me. And yeah, just connect with me. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. Love to hear from listeners.
And that's the way Ria and I met each other, was through LinkedIn. So so go there and discover Ria's story. Ria, Faith Positive Nation always wants to know about favorite Bible verse or Bible passage, and I hope I didn't give yours away early.
You didn't.
Okay.
You know, the one that I really come back to time and time again is Psalm 139:14. Fearfully and wonderfully made. And that was really the inspiration for my podcast, Fearfully and Wonderfully Me. Because I think many of us have self-limiting beliefs in our identity as a child of Christ.
Yes.
And I think when we can embrace that, then the world becomes ours. You know, possibilities become ours because it's not our possibilities, you know, it's God's. But I think until we can come to grips with our identity in Christ like that, you know, it's really, we're always going to face hardships and adversity in life. But when we can center our identity in God and that's our foundation, then navigating those challenges becomes so much easier. Trusting in God, you know, because we have that personal relationship with God, and that's powerful.
That is so very powerful. Ria Story, go to riastory.com, go to her page on Facebook and LinkedIn and other places, or you can come to getpositive.today, our site, and you can click through by her books and all that fun kind of stuff. Ria, thank you. Your story has certainly empowered me today, as I'm sure it has Faith Positive Nation. We pray God's blessings on you and on Mac, the man with the great last name and who used to have a great Camaro, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Joey. It's just a privilege to be here.
Thank you so much. God bless you and Mac.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Faith Positive Radio, the Christian business coaching conversation that increases your faith with greater joy at work so you love God and others more. Suggest guests and ask questions when you email Dr. Joey at info@getpositive.today. And be sure to get your free gift of the 5 positive business conversations to have today coaching program at getpositive.today. Until next time, may God bless you with everything your heart can hope for and more than your mind can imagine.